The Omen are not only persecuted in the lands between, but often outright disposed of upon birth due to the removal of their horns. Those that manage to survive this act of brutality seem to be subjugated and forced to use their incredible strength to the benefit of the very people who despise their existence. These people who have committed no crime are forced from birth to withstand a harrowing life, however short it may be. But if they are lucky enough to be born to a noble family, then they're at least given the kindness of being allowed to live below the capital city of Leyndell. This even applies to those that are born to the Queen of the land herself. Morgott and Mohg, the Omen Twins, were born into the royal family, sons of Elden Lord Godfrey, and even with their incredible status, they too were banished to the catacombs, until fate intervened, and the brothers took wildly different paths in order to serve their gods. With so much talk in the community about how Omen may play a part in the Land of Shadow once the DLC is finally in our hands, we thought now would be a good time to take a closer look at the Omen Twins, their lives, and their ambitions. Thank you for joining us this week for another episode of our ongoing Elden Ring lore series. Whether this is your first time finding the channel or you've been subscribed from the beginning, thank you for choosing to spend some time with us. If you end up enjoying this lore breakdown and want to follow us as we explore the Land of Shadow, please consider subscribing to the channel. With over 125 videos in our ever-growing playlist, we're sure you'll be able to find the answers to your burning questions about the lands between somewhere in our work. We also have a Discord, where our community of FromSoft fans come together to talk about their favorite games and share their ideas on the story and lore of Elden Ring. Whether you subscribe or not, thanks again for joining us. As always, your viewership is more than enough. And with that said, let's get back to the stories at hand. Morgott and Mohg were born to one of the highest stations possible in the lands between, that of the demigods, children of Marika and Godfrey. But the tragedy of their birth is that they entered the world touched by the primordial crucible, Omen. Unfortunately, Marika considered the Omen a curse on her land, and under her rule, these babies were to have their horns removed upon birth. The Omen Bairn tells us it is a doll of a curse-born bairn. Omen babies have all their horns excised, causing most to perish. These fetishes are made to memorialize them. Please don't hate me or curse me. Please. When it came to the Omen Twins, the regal Omen Bairn explains why they retain their horns. Doll of a curse-born bear from the Erdtree's royal line. Omen babies born of royalty do not have their horns excised, but instead are kept underground, unbeknownst to anyone, imprisoned for eternity. These memorial fetishes are fashioned in secret. I don't believe this policy of allowing royal Omen to keep their horns would have come from Marika. Rather, I believe this practice started with the Omen Twins, due to the wishes of Lord Godfrey. When we face him on our journey to become Elden Lord, he's holding his son in his arms and says,
"It's been a long while, Morgott."
These lines are spoken with the tenderness of a parent, unconcerned with the circumstances of their child's birth. It seems as though while Marika saw Morgott as a monster, Godfrey simply saw him as his son, which leads me to believe this has always been the case, and that his sons keeping their horns and being locked away was a compromise made to ensure that they did not die during the removal process. This rule would then be extended to other royals whose children were cursed from birth to live as Omen. So the Omen Twins came of age below the surface of Leyndell in the subterranean shunning grounds. However, it would seem they were given purpose while relegated to this dark place. We can face a projection of Mohg the Omen in the Cathedral of the Forsaken, and just past him is the entrance to the Frenzied Flame prescription, where a Tarnished can take the Frenzied Flame for themselves. Mohg's shackle tells us it is a fetish bathed in golden magic. Shackles were used to bind the accursed people called the Omen, and these ones were made to keep a particular Omen under strictest confinement. Though faint, the shackles still retained vestiges of power, enough to trap the once-bound Mohg on Earth, if only for a short time. Knowing that Mohg was shackled to the shunning grounds leads me to believe that this was the purpose given to him by his parents. Mohg was to keep any who were seeking it away from the Three Fingers. Upon finding his new destiny, he left a projection of himself to defend the cathedral, either due to a sense of duty or, more likely, so that none would suspect he was not at his post. This is all well and good for Mohg, but when it comes to Morgott, his purpose was more ambiguous. Perhaps he was meant to defend that place with his brother, as if we find our way there before facing Morgott in battle, a barrier will stand in our way, saying, "Sealed by Morgott, the Grace-Given." But the events transpiring above his home in the shunning grounds led Morgott to a new destiny, becoming the last king of Leyndell. After the shattering, chaos spread through the land. Each of Morgott's brothers and sisters had their own ambitions, seeking to defile the Golden Order with their own ideas as to how the land should be ruled. And with the first son of Marika slain, Morgott stepped up to become the new defender of Leyndell and the Erdtree. The remembrance of the Omen King tells us, though born one of the graceless Omen, Morgott took it upon himself to become the Erdtree's protector. He loved not in return, for he was never loved, but nevertheless, love it he did. Morgott knew that none in Leyndell would follow the words of an Omen, and so he became, as Gideon Ofnir referred to him, a veiled monarch, claiming parentage to Marika herself. In order to use his fearsome strength in defense of the Erdtree, he created Margit, the Fell Omen, a projection of himself, wielding a portion of his power, that would defend Leyndell from intruders. Where Morgott's love of the Erdtree comes from we can't know for sure, as he had only known persecution at the hands of his own family, but the talisman pouch dropped by Margit the Fell Omen gives us a clue. Small withered bag knitted by hand, bestowed upon the ruling lord, or those attempting to become lord, by the elderly finger reader. As the voices of the two fingers, finger readers are said to live lives eternal, and one is even supposed to have served as a wet nurse to royalty. If we make the assumption that Morgott was gifted this talisman pouch from the finger reader that was once his wet nurse, it's possible she captivated him with stories of the two fingers and grace, convincing a young Morgott of its benevolence. So it was that the Omen King felled countless opponents, which I'm sure included many tarnished before we found our way to the lands between. There is a sword monument that describes Morgott's achievements. The second defense of Leyndell, the Fell Omen stacks high the corpses of heroes, yet the Erdtree remains unshaken. And in the intro to Elden Ring, we can see Morgott masquerading as Margit, stabbing a man who looks like a young Radahn in the shoulder as a battle rages at the capital. The Fell Omen cloak even tells us, having slaughtered countless champions during the Shattering, the Fell Omen has become a horror to those who harbor ambitions for the Erdtree, or for lordship. No matter the odds he faced, all through the many years after the Shattering, Morgott defended Leyndell and the Erdtree. He even had his own elite force, the Knights Cavalry, that would weed out threats to the city on his behalf. Their armor tells us it is pitch black armor thinly painted with dried blood, worn by the Knights Cavalry who ride funeral steeds. The Knights Cavalry who now wander the dim roads at night were once led by the Fell Omen, and were deliverers of death for great warriors, knights, and champions. Still, after everything Morgott gave to protect the integrity of the Golden Order, he was rejected by the Erdtree. After defeating him, he tells us,
"Tarnished, thou art but a fool. The Erdtree wards off all who deign approach. We are all forsaken. None may claim the title of Elden Lord. Thy deeds shall be met with failure, just as I.
Given this bit of insight, it looks as if Morgoth did all of this hoping to rise above his blood as an omen. And in the end, he never could, even after sealing it within his blade. The Erdtree was never going to accept one touched by the Crucible as the new Elden Lord. Interestingly, while Marika and the Elden Beast could never accept Morgoth, his father and the very rune he wielded saw his potential. A great rune of the Shardbearer Morgoth. This great rune is the anchor ring that houses the base, and proves two things: that the Omen King was born of the Golden Lineage, and that he was indeed the Lord of Leyndell. While he never ascended to the throne, and even saw himself sustain upon it, Morgoth's great rune saw the truth of things. This twisted omen, born a demigod, was the sturdy center that held the Golden Order together, unlike his twin brother, who turned his back on his family. Mohg was born into the same pits as his brother, but unlike Morgoth, he did not revere the family that shunned him. Mohg instead stewed in the fetid depths, his omen blood boiling with hatred, until one day he was approached by the Formless Mother, and was set on a new path. The incantation Blood Boon tells us it is a sacred incantation of Mohg, Lord of Blood. Thrust arm into the body of the Formless Mother, then scatter the blood flame to set the area ablaze. The Mother of Truth craves wounds. When Mohg stood before her, deep underground, his accursed blood erupted with fire, and besotted with the defilement that he was born into. The question here is, how did Mohg come to commune with the Formless Mother at all? The power of outer gods besides the Greater Will has dwindled over time in the lands between, but perhaps his weapon holds the key. Mohgwyn's sacred spear is described as the Trident of Mohg, Lord of Blood, a sacred spear that will come to symbolize his dynasty. As well as serving as a weapon, it is an instrument of communion with an outer god, who bestows power upon accursed blood. The Mother of Truth desires a wound. It may just be that while exploring the depths of the subterranean shunning grounds, Mohg happened upon this spear, and in doing so, found a connection to the Formless Mother, which would go on to change his very destiny. If you subscribe to the theory that the Formless Mother and the Bloodstar are one and the same, there's also the possibility that he encountered her once his Omen horn twisted into his own eye, creating a blindness that would allow him to see the Blood Star. For more information on this idea, you can check out our video on Thorn Sorceries and the Blood Star. From here, Mohg would abandon his post, defending the Cathedral of the Forsaken, leaving to find his own destiny. But if he were to become Lord, he would need a consort. So it was that Mohg somehow, presumably through his blood portals, abducted Miquella, cocoon and all, in order to feed him blood from his pits, so that he may awaken a fully grown demigod. There is a bit of confusion here, as the intro to Elden Ring shows Mohg having removed Miquella from his cocoon. However, in-game we see where the cocoon was removed from the Erdtree, and it seems Miquella, or at least someone, resides within it in Mohg's temple. I'm willing to bet that the image of Mohg absconding with Miquella is not meant to be taken literally, as it makes more sense that he took the entire cocoon back to his dynasty. After all, it's not as if Miquella could re-cocoon himself in his sleep. Mohg would go on to recruit others to his cause, offering power from his accursed blood, and White Mask Vare was the only one of his kind to truly master this blood. The War Surgeon gown is described as a blood-stained white gown of the War Surgeons, who were effectively mercy killers. Of the surgeons that were abducted by the Lord of Blood, none were able to tame the accursed blood, none but Vare, that is, though he was an exception. Given that there's another White Mask surgeon who wields the Swarm of Flies incantation, we think it fair to assume that person failed to tame the blood granted to him. This explains why he doesn't engage in conversation with us like Vare. From here, Vare helped Mohg to recruit bloody fingers that would slay Tarnished across the land, helping to fill Mohg's blood pits. It seems he continued to grow his forces by sharing his blood with more and more people, creating a blood-infused second-generation Albinauric variant, and the Sanguine Nobles, who someday hoped to claim their new noble rank when the Mohgwyn dynasty came to fruition. Mohg believed his glorious dynasty could not come to pass until the resurrection of his stepbrother, as the Lord of Blood's exaltation tells us. Render up your offerings to your lord, drench my consort's chamber, slake his cocoon's thirst. His awakening shall herald the dawn of our dynasty. The remembrance of the Bloodlord also lays out Mohg's failure on this front, telling us, wishing to raise Miquella to full godhood, Mohg wished to become his consort, taking the role of monarch, but no matter how much of his bloody bedchamber he tried to share, he received no response from the young Empyrean. It's possible he received no response from Miquella due to him divesting himself from his flesh in order to reach the Land of Shadow, or it may be that Miquella was never the person in the cocoon to begin with. Either way, Mohg's dynasty could never truly begin, as we find our way to his palace and cut him down before he can make his play against the Golden Order and the Erdtree. The great rune we receive upon his death shows us just how far he strayed from his birthright, as it is soaked in the blood of the Formless Mother. A great rune of the Shard-bearer Mohg. Its blessing grants a blessing of blood to summoned phantoms, and imparts a phantom great rune upon successful invasion. Mohg and Morgott are twin brothers, and their great runes are naturally similar, but Mohg's rune is soaked in accursed blood, from his devout love for the wretched mire that he was born into, far below the earth. Rather than putting his faith in a religion and heritage that shunned his existence, Mohg turned his blind eye towards his parents and their Golden Order, instead embracing the blood that gave him power, and the mother who took him in her arms, asking only in return for wounds. Thank you for joining us for the stories of the Omen Twins, Morgott and Mohg. Did we miss any important details you think are worth mentioning? Why were Morgott and Mohg granted great runes if their mother wanted nothing to do with them? Did Godfrey care for his sons? And if so, why did he not take them with him on the long march? Why did Morgott choose to protect an order that did nothing but shun him? And why exactly did Mohg need Miquella in order to raise his dynasty up from below? Let us know your thoughts and theories in the comments. Don't forget to like, subscribe, hit the bell, and set notifications to all, so you never miss out on any of our lore dives. We look forward to seeing you again for more Elden Lore.